To the outside world, Eleanor and Daniel were the gold standard, the couple all our friends pointed to when they talked about what a marriage should be. Our love story was the kind people romanticized. College sweethearts who had navigated the uncertainties of our 20s together, building a life that felt both earned and destined. We bought a house in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, the kind with a tire swing in the front yard and neighbors who brought over freshly baked bread. Our home was filled with laughter, the smell of brewing coffee, and the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other's souls. We had shared dreams, sketched out on napkins in late-night diners and whispered in the dark. We planned to travel through Italy, to grow old on a wraparound porch, to watch our future children build forts in the living room. Stability was our brand. Daniel was the steady, ambitious provider, and I was the creative, nurturing heart of our home. We were a team, a fortress of two against the world. I believed in our foundation with a religious fervor. It was built on a decade of shared history, inside jokes, and unwavering support. He was the man who held me when my father passed away, the one who celebrated my small victories as if they were his own. In my mind, our bond was immutable, a fact of nature as reliable as the sunrise. I never imagined that beneath the polished surface of our perfect life, a rot was spreading, preparing to devour everything we had built. The erosion of our marriage didn't happen with a bang. It was a slow, creeping tide of neglect. The first signs were small enough to dismiss, tiny hairline fractures in the bedrock of our connection. It started with his phone, which had become a third entity in our relationship, a silent, glowing barrier between us. Dinners, once our time to reconnect, were now punctuated by the incessant click of his thumb scrolling through emails or messages he claimed were from work. His attention, once a warm, focused beam, was now a scattered, flickering light. The physical distance grew next. The casual touches that had once been our language, a hand on my back as I cooked, his arm around my shoulders on the couch, became infrequent, then non-existent. When I'd reach for his hand, his grip would be loose, his fingers limp. He began traveling more for work, weekend trips that left me with a vague sense of unease. He'd return exhausted and distant, offering brief, sterile summaries of his meetings. The excuses were always plausible, always professional, but they felt like a script. The worst part was the emotional void. He stopped asking about my day, his eyes glazing over when I tried to share a story or a frustration. He was a polite and courteous roommate, but the husband I had married, the man who was my partner, my confidant, my best friend, was disappearing before my eyes. I told myself it was stress, that his job was demanding. I made excuses for the growing chasm between us, desperately trying to patch the foundation that I didn't yet realize was already crumbling to dust. My intuition was screaming long before I had any proof. It was a low, persistent hum of wrongness, a feeling in my gut that something was fundamentally broken. But the whispers from the outside world gave my formless fears a terrifying shape. It began with my best friend, Sarah, over our weekly coffee. She was fidgeting, unable to meet my eyes. "Are you and Daniel okay?" she asked, her voice laced with a careful, pitying tone. "I saw him last week downtown at that new wine bar, the Cypress. He was with a woman from his office. They looked very close." She trailed off, but the implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The woman's name was Chloe, a junior associate I'd met once at a company party. I remembered her being sharp, ambitious, and uncomfortably flirtatious with Daniel. Then, a colleague of mine mentioned seeing Daniel's car parked in a residential area across town late on a weeknight, far from his office or any of our friends' homes. It was a small detail, but it lodged in my mind like a shard of glass. My own observations became sharper, more focused. I noticed the way he guarded his phone, the sudden need for a passcode on a device that had always been open between us. There was the credit card bill with a charge for a hotel bar I knew he had no business being at, an expense he explained away as entertaining a client. Each whisper, each clue was another crack in my denial. The doubt was no longer a vague feeling. It was a heavy cloak of suspicion that I wore every moment of the day, suffocating the last vestiges of trust one had left. The discovery that shattered my world into a million irreparable pieces came on a Tuesday. Daniel was on another one of his business trips, this time a 2-day conference in the city. I was tidying up his home office, a task I usually avoided, when a sleek, unfamiliar laptop bag caught my eye, tucked away under his desk. His work bag was gone, so this was something different. A cold dread washed over me. My hands trembled as I unzipped it. Inside, nestled among some files, was a second phone. It was a ghost phone, a secret I never knew existed. It felt cold and alien in my hands. It wasn't password protected. He had grown careless, confident in his deception. With a sickening lurch in my stomach, I opened his messages. And there it was. A universe of betrayal, laid bare in glowing text. Months, no, over a year, of conversations with Chloe. Their entire relationship, from the first flirtatious texts to their plans for a future that didn't include me. There were photos, the two of them at the Cypress, clinking wine glasses, a selfie in a hotel room, their heads close together, smiling with a shared secret intimacy. There were messages declaring their love, complaining about me, planning their next rendezvous. I read about the lies he told me, seeing them from the other side. The late nights at the office, the client dinners, the business trips. Every excuse was a carefully constructed lie to hide his other life. I sank to the floor, the phone clutched in my hand, the air forced from my lungs. The man I had married did not exist. My entire life, our entire history, was a lie. The betrayal was absolute, a nuclear bomb that had just detonated in the heart of my life. He walked in the next evening, carrying his suitcase and a weary, practiced smile. "Hey, honey. Long trip." He leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head and his lips met my cold cheek. The look of confusion on his face was almost comical. I didn't say a word. I simply walked over to the coffee table and placed the second phone on its surface. The silence that followed was deafening. He stared at the phone, then at me, his face draining of all color. The mask of the devoted husband crumbled, revealing the liar beneath. "Eleanor, I can explain." Those were the first words he spoke, the classic, pathetic anthem of the guilty. And then the dam of my pain broke. A rage I had never known I possessed erupted from the depths of my soul. "Explain," I screamed, my voice raw and unfamiliar. "Explain the months of lies. Explain the photos. Explain telling another woman you love her while you were sleeping in my bed." I picked up the phone and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered into 100 pieces, a perfect metaphor for our marriage. Tears streamed down my face. Hot and furious, he stammered, denied, minimized. It was a mistake. Meant nothing. He was unhappy. Each excuse was another knife in my already bleeding heart. The argument raged for hours, a toxic storm of accusations, sobs, and venomous words. The love I had for him curdled into something ugly and unrecognizable in that living room. The confrontation didn't bring clarity or closure. It was just the final violent act of destruction, the moment our shared history was officially declared dead and buried under an avalanche of deceit. In the days that followed the confrontation, I existed in a state of suspended animation. The house, once a sanctuary, felt like a tomb, haunted by the ghost of our marriage. I moved through the rooms like a zombie, the silence amplifying the roaring in my head. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. The nights were a torturous reel of his lies and her face, replaying in an endless loop. I was shattered, a porcelain doll dropped from a great height. Daniel, in a desperate panic, moved into the guest room, bombarding me with pathetic apologies, promises to change, and pleas for another chance. A part of me, the weak, heartbroken part, wanted to believe him. It wanted the pain to stop, to rewind time and go back to the comfortable illusion of our happy life. But another part of me was being forged in the fires of that heartbreak. In the ashes of my old self, something new and hard was beginning to form. The tears eventually stopped. The gut-wrenching sobs were replaced by a cold, quiet stillness. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw not a victim, but a survivor. The woman who had loved Daniel unconditionally was dead. In her place was someone else, someone who had seen the absolute worst of human betrayal and was still standing. A flicker of strength ignited within me, born not of hope, but of pure, unadulterated rage. He had broken my heart, but he would not break my spirit. The pain was not a weight to crush me, it was fuel, and I was just beginning to realize how I would use it. He begged, he pleaded, he promised the moon and the stars. He would end it with Chloe immediately. He would go to therapy. He would do anything to earn back my trust. And so, with a cold, calculated resolve that he mistook for grace, I agreed to try. We began the painstaking, fraudulent process of reconciliation. Our friends and family breathed a collective sigh of relief, praising my strength and his remorse. We were the couple who had faced the ultimate test and were fighting to survive. It was all a lie. I went to marriage counseling with him, sitting silently as he spun tales of his deep regret and his unwavering love for me. I listened to the therapist's advice on rebuilding trust, all while my mind was cataloging his weaknesses, his fears, his pressure points. I was not his partner in healing. I was a strategist studying her enemy. We had date nights, sterile, joyless affairs at expensive restaurants where we talked about everything and nothing, the chasm of his betrayal yawning between us. He would reach for my hand across the table, and I would let him take it, my skin crawling at his touch. I allowed him to move back into our bedroom, where I would lie on the very edge of the bed, my body rigid, feigning sleep until I heard the soft rhythm of his breathing. This new marriage was built not on the ruins of our old love, but on a foundation of pure, seething hatred. He saw my compliance as forgiveness. He saw my silence as healing. He was a fool. He thought he was rebuilding our home brick by brick. He had no idea I was patiently waiting for the right moment to burn it to the ground. The transformation was gradual, then absolute. The love I once felt for Daniel, a love so vast it had defined my entire adult life, didn't just die. It rotted. It decayed into a toxic, all-consuming hatred that became the new center of my universe. Every memory of our past happiness was now tainted, a scene from a life that had been a lie. Our wedding photos seemed to mock me from the walls, a monument to my own foolishness. His smell on the pillows, once a comfort, was now nauseating. The sound of his key in the door no longer brought a sense of relief, but a jolt of pure revulsion. I began to despise everything about him. The way he cleared his throat in the morning. The self-satisfied smile he wore after closing a deal at work. The hollow, empty sound of his, "I love you." Love and hate are not opposites. They are two sides of the same passionate coin, and the coin had flipped. My hatred was a living entity, a poison that I nurtured in the silent corners of our home. It colored every interaction. When I cooked him dinner, I imagined spitting in his food. When I ironed his shirts, I pictured them bursting into flames. My kindness was a performance, my smiles were masks, and beneath it all was a furnace of rage, burning hotter with each passing day. He was oblivious, of course. He believed my coldness was a symptom of my pain, a temporary phase in our healing. He had no idea that the woman he was living with, the woman he thought he was winning back, was no longer his wife. I was his judge, his jury, and in the quiet of my own dark heart, I had already sentenced him. My hatred was too immense to remain a passive force. Demanded action. Demanded retribution. And so, in the dead of night, while Daniel slept soundly, convinced he was on the path to redemption, I began to build my plan. My secret weapon was the information I had quietly copied from his burner phone before I destroyed it. Every text, every photo, every damning piece of evidence. It was my arsenal. I created a new, encrypted email account and a secure cloud folder, a digital vault for my vengeance. The plan was not to simply leave him. That would be too easy, too merciful. My goal was far more ambitious. I would dismantle his life with the same methodical cruelty he had used to dismantle mine. I would not just leave him, I would ruin him. The plan had multiple phases. Phase 1. Professional sabotage. Daniel's career was his pride, the source of his ego. I would target it first. Phase 2. Social annihilation. Our friends, our family. They would all see him for the liar he was. Phase 3. Financial ruin. I would ensure that when I finally left, I would leave him with nothing. The final, most important phase was reserved for Chloe. She was not an innocent bystander. She was a co-conspirator, and she would share in his downfall. I spent weeks meticulously planning every detail, every move and countermove. This secret project became my reason for living. It gave me focus, purpose, and a dark, exhilarating sense of power. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of his destruction. And the first brick was about to be laid. The first act of vengeance had to be subtle, a tremor in the foundation of his professional life that would be impossible to trace back to me. Daniel was leading a major project at his firm, a high-stakes pitch for a multi-million-dollar client he had been working on for months. His reputation was riding on its success. I knew from his calendar and the documents I had seen on his laptop that the final presentation was due on a Friday. The night before, after he had gone to bed, I crept into his office. I had watched him type his password 100 times. It was pathetically simple. I accessed the final presentation file on his computer. I didn't delete it, that would be too obvious. Instead, I made a series of tiny, corrupting changes to the file's data structure, a digital poison that would render it unopenable. Then, I went back into the version history and deleted all recent backups, making it look like a system glitch. The next morning, he was a ball of frantic energy. I watched, feigning sympathy, as he tried to open the file and was met with an error message. I watched his confidence crumble into sheer panic as he realized the backups were gone. He spent the entire day in a desperate, futile attempt to recover the work, his face growing paler with each passing hour. He missed the deadline. The client was furious. His boss was apoplectic. It was a catastrophic professional failure, a major blow to his career and his ego. He came home that night a defeated man, ranting about a freak server error. I held his hand, looked him in the eye, and told him how sorry I was. It was the most satisfying lie I had ever told. After the presentation disaster, a shadow fell over Daniel. The confident, arrogant man I despised was replaced by someone anxious and paranoid. He became obsessed with his work, convinced someone at his firm was trying to sabotage him. He saw rivals in every colleague, conspiracy in every setback. The professional blow had destabilized him, and I watched with grim satisfaction as his world began to feel as insecure as mine had. Our home life reflected his growing unease. He was irritable, quick to anger, his frustration spilling over into our carefully constructed illusion of reconciliation. He couldn't understand why things weren't getting better between us. He was trying, wasn't he? He was going to therapy. He had ended the affair. Why was I still so cold, so distant? He saw my hatred but misinterpreted it as unresolved pain from his betrayal. He believed the hostility he felt was just the ghost of his past transgression, not a new and active threat. He was living in a house with his executioner, and he thought I was his partner in healing. The irony was exquisite. I played my part beautifully, offering him a shoulder to cry on when he complained about his work, all while secretly celebrating his failures. I was a phantom in his life, the source of his growing misery, yet completely invisible to him. He was so consumed by the shadows at work that he never once thought to look for the enemy sleeping beside him in his own bed. The second phase of my plan was designed to shatter his public image and social standing. Daniel prided himself on being seen as a good man, a loyal friend, an upstanding member of the community. I was about to burn that facade to the ground. The opportunity came in the form of our annual charity gala, an event we co-chaired, attended by all of our friends, family, and his most important colleagues. My moment came during the speeches. I took the stage, ostensibly to thank the donors. I began with a warm smile, speaking about community, trust, and the importance of integrity. Then my tone shifted. "Speaking of integrity," I said, my voice ringing with a cold clarity, "I've learned a lot about it this past year. For instance, I learned that some people can stand before their friends and colleagues and speak about loyalty, all while maintaining a secret life." A nervous murmur went through the crowd. Daniel, sitting at the front table, froze. I didn't name him directly. I didn't need to. I crafted an anonymous story about a hypothetical husband's betrayal, using details so specific. A secret phone, a junior associate named Chloe, lies about business trips, that every single person in that room knew exactly who I was talking about. I concluded by saying, "So I'd like to propose a toast to honesty, and to the consequences that find us when we live without it." The room was dead silent. I walked off the stage, past my husband's ashen face, and left the gala. The bomb had been detonated. The whispers would turn into a firestorm of gossip. His reputation, so carefully cultivated, was now in tatters. He had been publicly, brilliantly, and irrevocably shamed. The public humiliation at the gala was the death knell for our fraudulent reconciliation. The pretense was over. Daniel came home that night in a silent, white-hot rage. The house, which had been a Cold War zone, now became an active battlefield. There was no more therapy, no more forced date nights. There was only the raw, undisguised animosity between two people who despised each other. The hatred that I had nurtured in secret was now out in the open, a toxic cloud that filled every room. Our conversations were clipped and laced with venom. Every request was a demand, every statement an accusation. We were two boxers in a ring, circling each other, waiting for the next opportunity to land a blow. His anger was that of a cornered animal, lashing out in confusion and wounded pride. My anger was different. It was cold, focused, and patient. I had the upper hand, and we both knew it. I had the truth, and I had the power. He no longer tried to win me back. He just tried to survive the daily onslaught of my contempt. The bitterness was absolute. I reveled in his misery, finding a dark joy in the anxious, defeated look that now permanently etched his face. The love we once shared felt like a distant, impossible dream. This raw, ugly, all-consuming hatred was the only thing that felt real anymore. It was the air we breathed, the food that nourished us. The marriage was still technically intact, but it was nothing more than a shared roof over two mortal enemies. With Daniel's life in a controlled demolition, it was time to turn my attention to the other architect of my pain, Chloe. She had, up until this point, remained insulated from the consequences, a ghost in our drama. That was about to change. I had done my research. I knew where she lived, where she worked, and, thanks to the information on the secret phone, I knew she had a fiancé, a successful architect from a prominent family. He was her Daniel, the stable, respectable man she was deceiving. My attack was precise and devastating. I created a package. Inside, I placed printed copies of the most damning text messages between her and Daniel, a few of the more intimate photos they had exchanged, and a detailed timeline of their year-long affair. I sealed it in an elegant black envelope and addressed it to her fiancé at his office. To ensure it had maximum impact, I sent a second identical package to her parents, whose address I had easily found online. I didn't include my name. I didn't have to. The evidence spoke for itself. Within a week, the demolition was complete. Her engagement was called off in a spectacular, humiliating fashion. Her parents, deeply conservative and image-conscious, were mortified. I heard through the office grapevine that she was fired from her job, the firm wanting to distance itself from the scandal. I had not just ended her affair. I had dragged her entire life into the ruin she had helped create. She was not just a mistress who had been found out. She was a pariah, a woman whose life had been systematically dismantled by an enemy she never saw coming. After the public shaming and the destruction of Chloe's life, a strange, tense calm settled over our house. The open warfare subsided, replaced by a weary, resentful truce. Daniel was a broken man. His career was stalled. His social life was non-existent, and he was trapped in a home with a wife who clearly despised him. From his perspective, the worst must surely be over. He had been exposed, he had suffered, and I had exacted my pound of flesh. He likely believed that this miserable, loveless existence was his penance, the new normal we would inhabit indefinitely, held together by shared history and financial entanglement. He fell into a state of resigned acceptance, believing he had hit rock bottom. He had no idea that he was merely standing on a trapdoor. I nurtured this illusion of stability. I stopped the overt attacks. I retreated into a cool civil distance. I let him believe that my rage had burned itself out, leaving only ashes of resentment behind. I wanted him to feel safe, to let his guard down, to believe that he finally understood the full scope of his punishment. This was the most critical phase of my plan, lulling him into a false sense of security before the final, annihilating blow. He was a soldier who thought the war was over, not realizing that the deadliest weapon had yet to be deployed. The grand illusion was complete. He was living in the quiet eye of the hurricane, oblivious to the towering wall of destruction that was about to crash down upon him. The final stage of my revenge was designed to be the most devastating, targeting the one thing he had left: his family and his finances. I waited for the perfect moment. His parents' 40th anniversary dinner, a small, intimate gathering at our home with only his closest relatives present. It was the perfect, inescapable audience. That evening, I played the part of the dutiful wife one last time. I cooked a beautiful meal. I was gracious, I was calm. After dinner, I asked everyone to remain seated, as I had an announcement. A confident, almost triumphant smile touched Daniel's lips. He likely thought I was going to announce a reconciliation, a final, public forgiveness. The fool. I stood at the head of the table and began. As you all know, I started, my voice steady, Daniel and I have been through a difficult time. And in the spirit of complete honesty that this family values, I feel it's time to lay all the cards on the table. I then distributed a small, neatly bound folder to everyone at the table, including Daniel. Inside was everything. Copies of our financial statements showing how I had, over the past 6 months, legally and meticulously transferred the majority of our liquid assets into a private trust account in my name. A copy of a signed agreement with a top divorce lawyer. And finally, the piece de resistance. A full, underacted transcript of his affair with Chloe, complete with the most sordid photos, proving his infidelity was not a brief mistake, but a calculated long-term betrayal. His face went from confusion to disbelief to sheer, unadulterated horror as he flipped through the pages. The master plan was revealed. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a complete and total liquidation of his life. The dining room, once filled with the warm chatter of a family celebration, fell into a tomb-like silence, broken only by the rustling of pages. Daniel stared at the folder in his hands, his knuckles white, his breathing ragged. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with the dawning, terrifying realization of the extent of my deception, the sheer depth of my hatred. He had thought I was a victim. He now saw me as a conqueror. You planned this," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "Every last bit of it." "Yes," I said, my voice cold and devoid of any emotion. "I did. I rebuilt this marriage on your lies, and now I'm burning it down with the truth." And with that, the flames ignited. His father, a proud, stoic man, looked at his son with utter contempt. His mother began to silently weep. His sister stared at him with disgust. He was exposed not just as an adulterer, but as a fool who had been outmaneuvered at every turn. He lunged to his feet, his face contorted in a mask of impotent rage. He screamed at me, called me a monster, a psychopath. His words were meaningless, the desperate howls of a defeated man. I didn't flinch. I simply stood there, watching the inferno I had created consume him. The marriage, the family ties, the last vestiges of his respectable life, All of it turned to ash in that single cataclysmic moment. I had not just left him. I had erased him. The fire of my revenge had finally burned through everything, leaving nothing behind but the beautiful, cleansing truth of his ruin. Chloe's fate was a crucial epilogue to my story of revenge. She was not merely collateral damage. She was a primary target, and her downfall was an essential part of Daniel's punishment. My calculated strike against her had been a complete success. The packages I sent to her fiancé and her parents had detonated her life with brutal efficiency. The engagement, which she had likely seen as her ticket to a stable and prosperous future, was immediately and publicly terminated. Her fiancé, humiliated and betrayed, wanted nothing more to do with her. Her family, deeply shamed by the scandal, ostracized her. She was left utterly alone, stripped of the support system she had taken for granted. Her professional life suffered the same fate. Fired from her law firm for the ethical and reputation nightmare she had created, she found herself blacklisted. The legal community is small, and gossip travels fast. No reputable firm would touch her. She had traded her career and her future for a sordid affair with a married man, and the price was her complete and utter ruin. In the end, she was left with nothing. No partner, no family support, no career. She was a casualty of a war she had willingly entered, dragged into the same fire that consumed Daniel. Her downfall was a stark and satisfying reminder that in the world of betrayal, there are no innocent co-conspirators. She had helped him shatter my life, and in return, I had made sure hers was unsaleable. Daniel was left in the smoldering crater that was once his life. When the dust from that final explosive dinner settled, he had absolutely nothing. His family, once his staunchest supporters, now looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. They had seen the undeniable proof of his deceit and the sheer depth of my calculated response, and they offered him no sanctuary. His friends, already alienated by the public humiliation at the gala, vanished completely. No one wanted to be associated with the man at the center of such a spectacular and vicious downfall. Professionally, he was finished. The initial project failure had been a blow, but the public scandal was a career-ending event. He was asked to resign from his position. His reputation as a trustworthy and competent leader irrevocably destroyed. Financially, he was crippled. My meticulous planning had ensured that I walked away with the majority of our shared assets, leaving him with a mountain of legal bills and a fraction of the wealth he had once taken for granted. He was a king dethroned and exiled from his own kingdom. The last I heard, he had sold the house, our house, and moved into a small, soulless apartment across town. He was a ghost haunting the ruins of his own life, a man stripped of his wife, his family, his status, and his future. He was nothing more than a pile of ashes, the final smoldering remnant of a life he had set on fire the moment he chose to betray me. I stand now not in the ashes of my old life, but in the cleared ground where it once stood. The fire of my revenge was all-consuming, and it burned away not just him, but the woman I used to be, the trusting, naive wife who built her world around a man. I am not the same person. I am scarred, yes. The memory of the betrayal is a phantom limb, an ache that sometimes returns on quiet nights. I carry the weight of the cold, hard person I had to become to orchestrate his downfall. But I am not broken. I am stronger. I reclaimed my power not by forgiving, but by fighting. I chose not to be a victim of his story, but the author of his demise. I found a terrifying strength in my hatred, a clarity in my rage. I am free now, in a way I never was before. I am unburdened by the weight of his lies, by the performance of a perfect marriage. The silence in my new apartment is not lonely. It is peaceful. It is the sound of my own sovereignty. I look at the ruins of his life, the world I so carefully burned to the ground, and I do not feel regret.